Hello, I'm Ed Rabyd, otherwise known as the Rabyd Atheist, a former pastor turned atheist, now a compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. You're free to like or dislike the video as you see fit, so feel free to hit those buttons. You're also free to comment below, and I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. You're also free to share my videos as much as you like. I'm more of an educator than anything else and always have been, so my purpose is to create education, things, different points of view to look out. I'm still working on my first Life of Christ using the new format. I'm trying to make this, a little bit more professional. That series I really want to do much better. I may even go back when it's all over and redo some of the earlier videos. But I'm trying to get it set up so that I can do a little bit more professional job than just reading the text. I hope to show you guys the text and some of the highlights and things, hopefully. But we'll see how that works out. But in the meantime, I did do a video yesterday, and I have a ton of comments to deal with. And one of those comments is very focused on the Bible and other matters. So I'm going to do this response video. I'll call this week, I think it's 21A, and then I'll call the other one B. So we'll head down that path. But I want to address some of these comments, and it's going to take a while, so I'm going to get right into it. LA Slate 13, 5 days ago, since talked to me about one of the videos from back then. He says, what do you think about the Canaanite religion? Yahweh is just another god in that pantheon. The Mesopotamian religions are interesting also. The Epic of Gilgamesh is pretty much where the story of Noah's Ark came from. All this gods and magic stuff is like comic goodness to me. Not a kid anymore, but I still love superheroes, religion, and mythology entertain me just like comic books do. As a former confused, scared Christian, I'm a former confused, scared Christian. Me too, brother. Me too. Okay. So happy to be an atheist now. But what do you think about William Lane Craig's response to Numbers 31, 18 through 25? I find it sickening. I'll get to the William Lane Craig thing later, but I wanted to comment about the rest of it. Part of how my faith began to unravel is I had biblical study education, and of course I had some Old Testament classes, and we studied a lot of different theories about the Old Testament. I think the most notable was the JEPD theory or the JDP theory, depending on how you put the letters, where the whole idea of the Pentateuch being an edited work that a whole bunch of people brought in a whole bunch of different sources and put it together, and the claim, what that did to the claim of Moses being the writer of those books just kind of destroyed it. I mean, he obviously couldn't have wrote his own epitaph, so we figured a scholar did that. But the contention of the JEDP theory was that the whole thing was a cobblation. And a lot of it does not right now match historical reality. I mean, the big thing that is just right in your face that kind of takes Judaism, Islam, and Christianity to task is the fact that when the Exodus takes place, Egypt controls Canaan. It controls the Levant. It controls what would become known as Israel and Judah later in the story. And so they would have been leaving Egypt to go to Egypt. We have really good archaeological record that for 200 years, when supposedly Joshua was conquering Canaan and the early and the judges are taking place, it's run by Egypt. There's no way that those things could have happened or taken place. And that's where my faith began to unravel. Well, when I began to have more questions, and the reason I went to seminary, I stated my reason to my biblical studies professors at Bible college. I still have questions that remain unanswered. And so I went to seminary, and one of the classes I took right away, Professor Olswalt's Old Testament theology, Old Testament study, whatever, and where he deals with the theological issues of the Old Testament. I think he's most famous for his statement, God doesn't have a penis. And what he's trying to differentiate the Canaanite religions, and this is getting to your question, he was trying to differentiate the Canaanite religions from the religions, Yahweh. that Yahweh doesn't have a penis. In other words, Yahweh isn't about sexuality. He isn't out, like all the other gods around the Israelites, which were basically going around screwing the goddesses, and they were just having a good old time screwing each other. He made the contention that the reason why Yahweh is different is because he doesn't have a penis. He's not really depicted as male necessarily. And he also isn't depicted as female, because the moment you depict a goddess female, you pull it into that sexuality, because feminine goddesses tend to be very sexualized. And, that's pretty true of men and women. I mean, men can be sexualized, but, it's hard to not think of women, I think, psychologically speaking, in sexual terms, which is unfortunate. We're still trying to, I guess, get over that. It's the reason why certain moral taboos still exist if you rationally consider them, they're stupid. But that's kind of how Oswalt was doing this. And this is the Canaanite thing. It's not so much that Yahweh was part of the Canaanite pantheon. If you look at the Old Testament, there's this constant competition between Yahweh and the gods around them. It starts with the Exodus story, where God whoops ass on all the gods of Egypt. And then he gets to Canaan and he has to whoop gods on Baal and Balaam and, all the other gods, the Philistine gods, and so on and so forth. And so there's this constant war between Yahweh and all the gods around it. So what you really have is every culture in Canaan has their own god or gods. And the difference that the Judah and Israel had is Judah in particular, apparently worship Yahweh exclusively, and Israel would kind of incorporate their God in with the rest of them. And so what you have is constant fighting between these gods. And you see that in the Bible. The Old Testament of the Bible is very much about the God Yahweh trying to whoop ass on all the other gods around it. And apparently was successful. And so became the chief god of him. And he's a jealous God, and he doesn't want any other gods before him and all the other Ten Commandment bullshit. So what you end up with then is this God Yahweh that kind of rises to the top. Well, the problem is the great was the fall of Yahweh, because his people, and this is where the Israelite religion, the Jewish religion, gets really unique, because they fall and they get, the northern kingdom of Israel. And I think there's historical evidence for like the divided kingdom up until when they say they're a united kingdom. There's very little evidence, historical evidence, once you get to a few of the early kings of Judah and Israel. Is kind of like legendary stuff. And then, you get to the whole Solomon, David, Saul thing, which is complete legend as far as I can tell. And the time frame is really awkward too. So, but there's good evidence for that. And so how does Israel fall to the Assyrians? How does Judah fall to the Babylonians? Well, it can't be that God was finally whooped. It couldn't be that Yahweh was finally defeated. It's just Yahweh got tired of you whoring around with all these other gods. That, and I'm going back to Oswalt's contention, God doesn't have a penis. Yahweh isn't about sexuality. He's about power and control, including over sexuality. And that probably is one of the things that I think made the Israelites and the Judah, those are the 12 tribes, assuming the 12 tribes really truly existed, assuming all that existed, it was a power game to Yahweh. Whereas the other gods around them, like Baal is a fun god. Part of the ritual is to go to the temple and, screw a temple prostitute. You don't have that with Yahweh. Yahweh, you bring your shit, have the priest sacrifice, keep a part of it, and burn the rest up, as a sacrifice to the god. Stupid, but different. It's to demonstrate economic and political power of the religion over the people. And so that's kind of how it worked. it's a very different concept than a lot of the people around them, but that doesn't necessarily indicate divine anything. I even read this in seminary. There was a guy that was contending you either have to say that the Israelites, evolved. He says, but there's no evidence that religion necessarily evolves from pantheism to polytheism to monotheism. He says you don't see that anywhere. You see unique religious systems just pop up. He says you either have to say that they did get revelation from God or that they were religious geniuses and they had come up with some different religious concepts. Applying Occam's razor and eliminating God, yeah, I think they were geniuses in that regard as they came up with stories that were compelling. I mean, you're right, man. It reads like a comic book. The stories of the judges, I still like to read. I don't look at them. I think they're legendary as Hercules and Perseus and all the rest of the S's in Greek mythology. But I look at it as kind of that. There's something inspiring about 300 men under a ruler named Gideon whooping the ass on tens of thousands of guys. There's something inspiring about a shepherd boy grabbing a sling and killing a giant. There's something inspiring. But all of these things I can find in other mythology. You're right. It's really comic book stuff. And, the real hard part of all this stuff, like with the Epic of Gilgamesh, with its creation story, and, the story of Noah's Ark, and you see all these other religions with all their origin stories, and they're very similar to the Bible. And you realize a lot of them are older than the Bible. Okay? And they're older than the Old Testament. And you begin to realize that all this stuff came pulling out of that and combined into this religion. Israelite religion is basically the genius of taking religions that existed, applying some new concepts, and creating something from whole cloth. And I think you really see this probably during the exile by Assyria and Babylon, and then later on as the Persian Empire says, hey, if you can prove you're a distinct people, we'll let you go back to the land where you came from. Well, that's pretty goddamn good of motivation to create a code of laws, a mythology, and to present, this is our culture, this is our thing, we would like our land back. I mean, that's pretty good motivation to do all that. And I think that's where they got the idea. And a bunch of editors sat down and they started to take all the stuff that was known, they added in their own legends and their own stuff and came up with a pretty compelling story. But it's just as fictional as Odin using a frost giant's corpse to create the earth, or Zeus defeating Kronos. It is that kind of bullshit level of bullshit, but people believe it and they believe it's true, and then they wonder why they have such a hard time, because what they believe is true doesn't conform to the reality of the world, and that becomes a problem. All right, second part. What do I think of William Lane Craig's response to Numbers 31? I think that any response to Numbers 31 that doesn't cryingly condemn genocide and sexual slavery of little girls is an interpretation that's trying to justify how a good, loving God can justify genocide and the sexual slavery of girls. If you're trying to do anything other than condemn those things and say that God is an asshole, I would say that you're trying to justify genocide and you're trying to justify the enslavement of little girls. Now, I want to be very careful here. And so a lot of the arguments stem with context and everything else. I want to get past all that. Let's just say, for argument's sake, the goddamn story is true. What kind of God are we dealing with here? The Midianites get their asses handed to them. They get beat. All their shit gets taken. And the Israelite soldiers have gathered up, a bunch of prisoners. And the decree, now you understand that this is the same decree that will be given to Joshua when he enters the land of Canaan. Kill them all, except for the women that are virgins. You get to keep those for yourself. everybody else dies. Okay, same command. Okay. So we're dealing with the situation in Numbers in the story that starts the idea that genocide is okay, that will be used later through the book of Joshua. Okay, and I don't care what context you look at. I don't care what historical backing you look at. The picture here is of God Almighty ordering everybody to die, except girls who haven't had sex. And the specific reason that's given is you get to keep those for yourself. You can hem and haw about worm meetings. You can hem and haw, full stop. I don't care if it's William Lane Craig's response. I don't care if it's some other asshole apologist's response or theologian or biblical scholar's response. Full stop. You're going to spend the next whatever time you're trying to do to justify this, to justify genocide and sexual slavery. Period. That's what you're trying to justify, and you're trying to justify why a good God will allow that sort of thing. Now, I'm going to create a very emotional picture here, but I think it gets to the heart of the ethical problem a lot faster when you try to create something in people's mind, what we're talking about here. So I'm going to give you a scenario. A group of 4 Israeli soldiers break into a Midianite house. Okay, they've won the battle. They break into the Midianite house. They take as prisoners the following people. They take as prisoners the man of the house. They may have had to kill him. He might have resisted and they run him through with a spear. But they take the man of the house, his wife, who is pregnant, their baby boy, who is 2 years old. They take 2 other children of this couple, an 8-year-old girl and a 13-year-old girl. Both the 8-year-old girl and the 13-year-old girl are virgins. Now, I want you to understand what this decree is. Now, if you can picture this like a movie where this family is huddled together, okay, they're scared. They don't know what's going to happen to them. Their country's been defeated in war. They have all these Israelites around them, and they're prisoners and are being marched up, and they get marched up to Moses. And Moses says, this is what the Lord God says, kill them all, even the little ones. Leave only the girls that have not known man, who are virgins. You get to keep those for yourself. Here's what happens. They kill the man. The pregnant woman, and now I love all you evangelicals who are pro-lifers. You need to understand that the innocent baby in this womb, because she is a woman who has obviously had relationships with her husband, she's supposed to die. And the baby dies along with her. And the baby back in that culture, even Jewish culture, is not really a person, because you don't really count a Jewish boy as real until he's been alive for 8 days. And I think girls are even longer. Until they're circumcised or whatever, they're not real humans. That's why David's baby is not named. He dies in 7 days. Okay. Oh, you didn't know that, huh? After they get done killing the pregnant mother, they kill the 2-year-old boy. He's dead too. Because according to the order, he's got to die. I'm beginning to have a problem with your ethics if you're going to sit there and say God was justified in killing an innocent baby and innocent baby boy and young boys simply because they were boys. Simply because they had a penis instead of a vagina, they died. Everybody with a penis died. The 2 girls, the 8-year-old and the 13-year-old, both get kept. Now, the 8-year-old's too young to be a sex slave yet. But she'll be kept around. She'll do manual labor. And when she's old enough, her master will take her to the bedroom and rape her, and she will become his wife. The guy probably is the one who killed her father, killed their mother and their unborn sibling, and killed their baby brother. The 13-year-old is really out of luck because she's menstruating and she's already old enough. She is going to be taken by that Israeli soldier and raped that evening and become his wife, after she has just watched that same Israeli soldier kill her entire family, except for her little sister. And then she knows that the fate of her little sister in a few years is going to be the same as hers. Justify that. I don't give a flying shit apologist out there what context it is. I don't give a damn anymore what the real words mean. I don't care. The story justifies genocide and the sexual slavery of girls. And any highfalutin argument, and I know LA Slave 13, you're not saying this at all. I want my message to go out to everybody. I don't give a shit how you try to justify that. That is wrong. And I'm an atheist saying that that story paints your God as an evil fuck. And I don't apologize for saying those two words together, because that's what Yahweh is. He's an evil fuck. He is so insecure about himself that he has to kill innocent babies. He has to kill little children. He has to kill mothers who are pregnant. Anybody that can rise up later and be the bad guy to his people, he has killed. And on top of it all, sorry, girls, if you haven't had sex, you're out of luck. You're kind of lucky you get to live, but you're going to be the slave of the very guy that killed all your family. And you're going to be his concubine. You're going to be his sex slave. You have no choice about it. Don't sit there and try to consider the context of the passage. Fuck that. That is evil shit. I don't care who you are. And I know a lot of Christians don't like to look at that passage and other passages just like it, because the same orders were given to Joshua for the whole damn Canaanite area. And the people of Jericho butchered all of them. Pregnant women, little children, didn't matter. Killed them all. Justify it. Try to tell me that God's a good guy. Oh, they were evil. Evil. Based on whose definition of evil? Well, God's. Well, prove God exists. Then I'll accept his best definition of evil. Well, I can't do that. Well, then I guess we're at square one. So let's look at the story. Oh, yeah, he commits genocide. He kills little children. He kills pregnant mothers. He kills unborn children, something you claim to be against. And somehow your God, who orders all that in the Old Testament, is good. Well, that's the Old Testament. I said, it doesn't change the fact that they're both supposed to be the same God in Christian theology. See, I'm sorry, LSA, I know this went beyond probably the answer you're looking for, but I don't care if it's William Lane Craig or some other apologist asshole. If you're trying to justify this passage as a moral and ethical thing that somehow makes God into a righteous person and justified for committing genocide, aborting babies, and committing virgin girls to the sex slave trade, then I would say that you're a pretty evil asshole to be trying to justify all that. This is one of the passages that bothered me so much, I would say it's in my top 10 contributors of why I'm a fucking atheist. Because this shit is evil. It's evil. And I have better ethics than to accept that this God is a good God. I'm an atheist, and I would never subject somebody to death simply because I didn't like their viewpoint on things. And I sure as hell wouldn't subject girls to sexual slavery. But your God does. And if I can be a better moral person than your God is probably non-existent. He's made up. Well, I'm going to cut it off there. I'll get to some of the other questions, which are a little bit more philosophical tomorrow. But I did want to deal with some of the biblical questions, and I think this is a good way to do it. So once again, thank you for stopping by my channel. Videos, comments have the way of doing things for Friday videos, and this is a kind of a weekend video, part one, part A, or rather, and I'll get to some of the other questions tomorrow. But thank you for once again coming. Be sure to like and subscribe. And the only thing I don't tolerate is name calling in the comments. You're free to demonstrate somebody's an idiot. Just don't call them one. Keep your argument clean. I respect people that can argue clean. So without, resorting to name calling or insinuations about people's character. In the meantime, this is Ed Rabyd, the Rabid Atheist, wishing you a good day and good luck. And hopefully someday I can make you a rabid atheist like myself.